Well, when I was younger, it was a lot around like youth-centered things, and like that was like a lot of like kids who are mixed and stuff. Like, I think now what I'm looking for is trying to go like more to like the root of things, and so I'm wanting to spend time like in Guadalajara and in Tala, where my ancestors are from, and also in like Pauls Valley in Oklahoma, and like that. My grandma's ancestors were displaced from like the Arkansas area, so it's like Cato Gap is like the spot where like Cato people are from. So I'd want to go there, and I think I've like had my like barriers like financially, obviously, like for travel and for being out there, and like just just being there is expensive, like, and also like this feeling of like, will I be accepted, or like will I just be like some tourist or some whatever, like, so there's like my own like internalized things too. So but I think like generally the elders that I've met like are really encouraging of like connecting to your ancestry period, like, and like they're like mixed or not mixed, like it's still, those are still your ancestors, and like how can you like honor them, and so I think I'm wanting to do that like through art, like through like studying pottery from those different areas, like so that's kind of like a long-term goal, is to learn more about like ancestral practices around pottery specifically. Yeah, and I think part of that is because we don't have the same like kind of like baggage as older generations. I think older generations experienced a lot of discrimination, like, and a lot of like forced assimilation, and pressure to like conform to like like the culture, like the white supremacist culture of the U.S. And I think like a lot of younger folks haven't experienced that as in the same way, like at the same level, and so it is easier to feel pride, or to feel like a sense of like wanting to reconnect when there's not like these like major repercussions to that, like like here, like ceremonial practices were outlawed until like the 70s, like, or almost the 80s, and so people were literally like, yeah, could be like arrested, or could be like have their children taken away from them, or like all of these things, like these like serious repercussions to just participating in culture that we don't have that anymore, like, so. But instead we have like our family members who have all that baggage, like, so people who don't necessarily want to talk about it, or don't know what to say, or like don't see it as like important in the same way.
And so it wasn't until actually I like came out as trans and had been working on transitioning that I realized I could feel like able to go back to Lodge. And I told my mom, and my mom talked to people at Lodge, and you know, people at Lodge are from a diverse community. I don't go to a lodge that's tribal specific. It's more like a collection of tribes, just offering sweat for whoever needs it. And also, a lot of people are there are formerly incarcerated folks. So there's a like hyper masculinity to it. So I was a little nervous, but they said I was welcome, and they understood that I was the term my mom used and the term everyone else used was two spirit. So they said I was two spirit, and that I could be there, and that they understood. And so I went back to Lodge, and I've just kept going ever since. It's felt really great. I will say the conflict I have is it's interesting moving from the suburbs to a city space, and that queerness in the suburbs for me looked a lot more like just survival. So I dressed in a very binary way to survive and feel safe and feel like I could go to the grocery store and not be harassed. And coming to a city that, especially a city like Berkeley, that's loosened up a bit again. And I realized that I could dress in a way that really truly feels like two spirit, multi spirit. Although I'm hesitant to not disrespect anybody by using the word two spirit, I do think the word two spirit like really fits as someone who on some in moments where there really needs to be like a feminine strength, I feel able to call that up. And in my day-to-day life, I often call up this masculine strength. But that has been interesting to try to explain to these, macho, formerly incarcerated people, but they're trying to learn. It's pretty fun to actually talk with people because everyone's trying to learn, and like the more, by having this like by presenting this like decolonial lens idea of like, hey, people like me have always been around, especially in our community. There's like a much more like acceptance of it, which just feels, not just healing for me, but kind of healing for them. And so when I think of land, I don't necessarily think of like, oh, just like I feel connected to the Peñadobe Hills. It's like, it wasn't just like going there that felt good. It was like going there and being in silence and being able to watch the seasons change and seeing life beyond myself like bloom there, like the baby deer and the turkey vultures and all of that. To me, it like belongs in the word land. And I feel probably most connected to the specific parts of land of Peñadobe. Like I said, I remember so often skipping mandated therapy. I had to instead go just sit at Peñadobe because I felt like it could actually hold the pain I was feeling so much better than a therapist. And I could actually like release it there in a way that I didn't feel safe to at a therapy office, at least. I also think of oddly places like there's this house in Calexico that it's my dad's family house, and I've only been to it once, and I've only been to the outside of it, but it's odd because I always like return there in my dreams a lot and like meet my like bisabuelo that I never met, and so I feel oddly connected to that land too. Let's see. What I think has been interesting and made me kind of reflect on land a little bit more is the recent move here to Berkeley, in that I kind of always kept returning to Vacaville, and so it always felt like relationship to land. It mostly meant there, and it was easy to feel connected there. And I'm realizing now that when you physically move, since it's like intimacy, right? You have to work again to be connected. You can't just show up and be like, all right, I belong here. I'm connected to this land. It feels like there's this dissonance. And I don't know if that's in like the way that we travel now or how fast we move, but I've just really felt like here I've had to work really hard to feel connected to this new piece of land. And I'm doing that on this property specifically that I live on, there's a lot of sick plants that are diseased. And they're like an apple tree and like a lot of these fruiting bodies. And so I've been working really hard to just like get those plants feeling better, and that would be a way that I felt like connected to this land again.
I think popular culture sees indigenous people as like very like an image, like something very stereotypical of like the perfect indigenous person knows their native language, knows the medicine, like lives in somewhere that is not a city, like either lives in a reservation or in a pueblo, and like practices ganaderismo or like all these things, like very traditional, kind of like almost like what they would call like a backwards type of living, and that is just not the reality for most indigenous people, especially those of us that have ended up in the cities, that have ended up like I'm wearing all black and like I wear huge boots and like I love things that are not considered indigenous, and yet me wearing it as an indigenous person, like, doesn't that make it indigenous? Or like me creating things that are very much inspired by like modern and even colonial like standards of like beauty and art, like isn't it indigenous because an indigenous person is doing it? I Yeah, it's just very complicated, I think, of like the question of like what does it mean to be indigenous, but I think I try to root it in kind of like values in relation to the land, because like being here in the Bay Area and having no like familial ties, I've had to examine a lot my relation as a settler here, That even though I'm here because of my own history of colonization and displacement, I think my people have also been kind of like weaponized and used to displace other indigenous people, in a cycle that is just very horrendous. And I think a lot of other people of color have had a similar story where they've been coerced to displace others, in order to assure their own survival. And so I've had a lot of unpacking to do around like my own feelings of guilt as like a Mexican person taking up space in like Ohlone territory. But I also think that it's important to recognize those feelings and feel the responsibility and know how it is that you got where you are. But I think it's also important to not let it like paralyze you, or like be defeated by it. So instead, I try to just, because again, there's no perfect pre-contact world that we can go to. Like, there's no way we're getting the settlers out of here. Like, they're not going anywhere realistically, and that's fucked up. But it is just not happening. I think what we can do is like work from where we are, and that to me just means giving back to this land that has given me so much and has nourished me and loved me and housed me the past 4 years. Especially because these past 4 years have been like where I've grown so much, and I've like grown to love myself so much and grown to love the earth so much. And so I feel like to give back to the land means making relations with indigenous people here.